"I wish your sister had kids instead of you," my father announced across the Thanksgiving dinner table, his voice cutting through the warm noise of family gathering with surgical precision. "Her children would have been worth something. Smart kids, accomplished kids, not whatever you've managed to produce." My 3 children, Sophia, 26, Marcus, 23, and Emma, 19, sat frozen, their forks suspended mid-air, before the tears started and they fled the table one by one. But why did I remain calm despite my breaking heart, and why, 6 months later, would my father find himself lying on an operating table, staring up at the surgeon who would hold his life in her hands? "Hello, Grandpa." Sophia's voice was steady behind her surgical mask. "Let's talk about what your grandchildren are worth now." My father's face went pale against the hospital sheets. "Before we proceed, I want you to understand something. The worthless granddaughter you dismissed at Thanksgiving? She graduated top of her class from Johns Hopkins Medical School. She completed a cardiothoracic surgery fellowship that accepts 12 people nationwide each year. And she's about to perform a triple bypass that will determine whether you live or die." The anesthesiologist paused, watching the exchange. "But don't worry, Grandpa. Unlike you, I actually believe family has value. Even family members who don't believe in me." My father, Harold Whitmore, had been measuring worth since before I was born. His worldview was simple. Success was measurable, quantifiable, visible. Bank accounts, job titles, academic credentials, social status. These were the metrics that determined human value, and he applied them ruthlessly, especially to his own family. My sister Victoria had always been the favored child. She'd followed the path our father prescribed: elite education, prestigious career in finance, marriage to an investment banker, residence in a neighborhood our father considered appropriate. She'd earned his approval through relentless achievement. I'd taken a different path. I'd married Thomas, a carpenter who built beautiful furniture and loved me completely. I'd become a schoolteacher, working with children in underserved communities. I'd raised my children in a modest house filled with books and laughter rather than the trappings of visible success. In my father's calculus, I'd wasted my life. And by extension, my children were products of that waste. What my father never understood was that worth isn't always visible. Sophia had shown brilliance from an early age. Not the showy kind that adults notice and praise, but the quiet kind that observes, analyzes, and understands. She'd been fascinated by how things worked, how bodies healed, how science could repair what was broken. She'd worked her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. She'd studied while her wealthier classmates partied. She'd earned her place at Johns Hopkins Medical School through pure merit, without the family connections or financial support that made such achievements easier for others. My father had never asked about her progress, never attended her white coat ceremony, never acknowledged that his worthless granddaughter was becoming one of the most talented cardiac surgeons of her generation. He'd been too busy praising Victoria's childless career achievements to notice Sophia saving lives. The Thanksgiving confrontation had been building for years. Every family gathering included my father's comparisons: Victoria's promotions versus my classroom, her vacations versus our staycations, her designer clothes versus our practical wardrobes. My children had grown up absorbing his message. They were lesser, disappointing, not worth his attention. But that Thanksgiving, he'd said it directly. To their faces. In front of the entire family. Worth something. As if my children were commodities to be evaluated and found lacking. Marcus had been the first to leave the table. He was studying environmental engineering, working to develop sustainable building materials. Work my father dismissed as hippie nonsense. He'd heard his grandfather's dismissal and quietly walked out. Emma had followed, tears streaming. She was studying music therapy, learning to help trauma survivors heal through art. My father had called it a waste of a college education. Sophia had been last to leave. She'd looked at her grandfather with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hurt, exactly. Something closer to clinical assessment. The look she probably gave patients before diagnosing what was broken inside them. "I'm going to remember this, Grandpa," she'd said quietly. Every word. Then she'd left too. The 6 months between Thanksgiving and the surgery were a cold war. I'd stopped attending family gatherings where my father would be present. My children had done the same. Victoria had tried to mediate, but her efforts were half-hearted. She'd benefited too long from being the favored child to genuinely challenge the dynamic. My father had noticed the distance, but hadn't apologized. In his mind, he'd simply stated facts. If those facts were painful, the problem was our sensitivity, not his cruelty. Then his heart began to fail. The diagnosis came in April: severe coronary artery disease, multiple blockages, emergency bypass surgery required. The cardiologist at St. Michael's Hospital had been direct. Without surgery, Harold Whitmore had weeks to live. With surgery, he had a chance. The hospital's top cardiac surgeon was Dr. Sophia Whitmore. My father hadn't known. He'd never asked about Sophia's career, never Googled his granddaughter's name, never bothered to learn that she'd become one of the most sought-after heart surgeons in the region. When the hospital scheduled his surgery, he'd assumed he'd be treated by some stranger. He'd been wrong. I learned about the situation from Sophia herself. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something." Her voice on the phone had been professional, controlled. "Grandpa was admitted to St. Michael's today. Cardiac emergency. He needs a triple bypass." "Oh God." "He's stable for now. But here's the complicated part." She paused. "I'm the surgeon assigned to his case." "Can you do that? Operate on family?" "Technically, yes. The ethics guidelines allow it if no other qualified surgeon is available. And for this specific procedure, I'm the most qualified person in the hospital. But I can refer him to another facility if that's more appropriate." "What do you want to do?" Another pause. "I want to save his life. That's what I do. I save lives, including the lives of people who don't deserve saving. Grandpa's heart doesn't know he called me worthless. It just needs to be fixed. Sophia. But I also want him to know. Before I operate, I want him to understand exactly who will be holding his heart in her hands. I want him to lie there and think about what he said at Thanksgiving." The pre-surgery conversation was something Sophia had carefully planned. She'd asked me to be present, along with Thomas. Victoria had come too, suddenly interested in family reconciliation now that her favored status couldn't help her father's failing heart. My father lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. The monitor beeped steadily. The 4 dripped. And his granddaughter, the worthless one, stood at the foot of his bed in surgical scrubs. "Grandpa, I want to make sure you understand the procedure." Her voice was completely professional. "You have 3 blocked arteries. I'll be grafting healthy blood vessels to bypass the blockages, restoring blood flow to your heart. The surgery takes approximately 4 hours. Recovery is typically 6 to 8 weeks. You're really doing this?" His voice was weak, confused. "I'm the head of cardiothoracic surgery at this hospital. This is what I do." She picked up his chart, reviewed it casually. "Your worthless granddaughter, saving lives. Interesting how that worked out." "Sophia, I didn't mean." "You meant every word. You always do. You've spent my entire life measuring worth by metrics that matter to you. Money, status, visibility. You never asked what I was building. You never cared." She set down the chart. "But here's what I've learned, Grandpa. Worth isn't what you've accumulated. It's what you can do for others. Right now, I can do something for you that no amount of money or status can buy. I can give you more years of life." My father struggled to respond. "I was hard on you kids. I know that. But I was trying to push you toward success. You were pushing us away. There's a difference." Sophia pulled up a chair, sat beside his bed. "Marcus is developing building materials that could reduce carbon emissions by 30%. Emma is working with veterans who haven't spoken since combat, helping them find their voices through music. I'm saving lives every week. Hearts that would have stopped beating, families that would have been destroyed. I didn't know. You didn't ask. You were too busy comparing us to theoretical children Aunt Victoria never had. Perfect imaginary grandchildren who would have met your standards. Victoria's very successful. Victoria is successful by your metrics. But she's also lonely, exhausted, and she told me last month that she regrets never having children because she was too busy chasing achievements you would approve of." Sophia stood. "Your standards cost everyone, Grandpa. Even the child you favored." The surgery lasted 4.5 hours. I sat in the waiting room with Thomas, holding his hand, watching the clock. Victoria sat across from us, unusually quiet. Marcus and Emma had come too, despite everything. Their grandfather was still their grandfather, even if he'd never valued them. When Sophia finally emerged, still in scrubs, we all stood. "He's stable. The surgery went well. 3 grafts, all functioning normally. He'll need significant recovery time, but he should make a full recovery." The relief was overwhelming. Whatever my father had done, I didn't want him dead. "Can we see him?" Victoria asked. "In a few hours, when he's out of recovery. He'll be groggy, but he'll want to see family. Sophia paused. All his family, including the grandchildren he dismissed. The conversation in the recovery room was different from any we'd had before. My father was weak, connected to machines, dependent on the care of strangers, and one granddaughter who was anything but a stranger. The vulnerability had stripped away some of his armor. I've been wrong. His voice was hoarse. About a lot of things. Yes, Sophia said simply. You have. I measured you kids by the wrong standards. I see that now. Do you? Or are you just grateful that my standards included saving your life regardless of how you treated me? He considered this. Both, maybe. I'm grateful you're the person you are. Someone who helps even people who don't deserve it. And I'm ashamed that I spent so long not seeing what you were becoming. Marcus spoke up. We didn't need your approval to become who we are. We had Mom and Dad. We had each other. Your opinion was painful, but it wasn't essential. It should have been supportive, not painful. I know that now. Emma, the quietest of my children, added. Knowing it isn't the same as changing it. Words at deathbeds are easy. What matters is what comes after, if you get an after. You're right. You're absolutely right. The recovery took 3 months. During that time, my father was forced to depend on the family he'd dismissed. Sophia monitored his recovery. Marcus built him a ramp for his front porch when stairs became difficult. Emma visited weekly, playing music that seemed to calm him in ways medication couldn't. And slowly, gradually, something shifted. Not a dramatic transformation. My father was too old, too set in his ways for complete change. But he started asking questions. About Marcus's research. About Emma's therapy work. About the lives his grandchildren were building outside his narrow definitions of success. Tell me about your patients, he asked Sophia one afternoon. Which ones? Any of them. All of them. I want to understand what you do. It was a small thing, but it was a beginning. The anniversary of that Thanksgiving came around again. This time, my father asked if he could host, a request that surprised everyone. We gathered cautiously, uncertain what to expect. Before dinner, he stood. Slowly, carefully, his hand touching the chair for balance. Last year, I said something unforgivable at this table. I told my daughter that I wished her sister had children instead, because her children, my grandchildren, weren't worth something. He paused. I was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. The table was silent. Sophia saved my life. Not just professionally, she reminded me what worth actually means. It's not bank accounts or job titles. It's what you contribute, what you build, who you help. He looked at each grandchild in turn. Marcus is going to help save the planet. Emma is healing people's souls. Sophia is saving hearts, including mine. His voice cracked slightly. I spent so long measuring the wrong things that I almost died without knowing what treasures I had in my own family. Dad, I started. Let me finish. I can't undo what I said. I can't take back years of dismissal and comparison. But I can spend whatever time I have left actually seeing my grandchildren. Actually valuing them. Actually being the grandfather I should have been all along. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. My father still sometimes fell into old patterns. Comparing, measuring, judging. But he caught himself more often now. Apologized more readily. Asked questions instead of making pronouncements. Sophia still keeps professional distance during family gatherings. I love him, she told me once. But I also remember everything. Both things can be true. Marcus and Emma have found their own peace. Not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance that their grandfather is flawed and trying, which is perhaps all any of us can manage. And me? I learned that my children never needed their grandfather's validation. They'd found their worth long before he recognized it. But it's still nice when he does. Her children would have been worth something. Those words sent my children from the table in tears. 6 months later, one of those worthless children held his life in her hands, and saved it anyway. Because worth isn't measured in the metrics he valued. It's measured in what you do when someone needs you, even someone who never believed in you. My daughter is worth everything. She always was. Her grandfather just needed his heart to stop working before he could finally see it.